Here we go. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lurking for Legends, a live video cast where we talk with people from all walks of the publishing industry. I'm Christy Stratus, author of the Dark Victoriana collection. I write historical fiction, historical suspense, and historical fantasy. And my awesome co-host is Richard H. Stevens, epic fantasy author of the series Soulforge Universe, Soulforge Saga, and a lot more. Lurking for Legends is a live interactive broadcast, and we encourage viewers to chime in with questions for our guests or comment on what you hear in the show. So tonight we are so excited. We are thrilled to welcome a very talented panel of historical fiction authors. So welcome everyone. We are so glad to have you here. Thank you for coming. I know you are all super busy and you all have a lot published. I'm sure you'll get back to writing after we finish this. So we're just going to start out by going around and asking each person to introduce themselves. So we will just start with Tracy. It's so nice to have you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is a wonderful invitation because, authors, we sit and write all day, and I don't know if I'm one of the rare ones, but I just love to have an opportunity to talk. so, so I'm so happy to be here from Florida and eager to answer any questions anybody may have. And as I said before, if I don't know the answer, I'm a fiction writer, so I'll just make it up. So.
I love that. Absolutely. We're going to learn a lot more about her books soon as well. So let's move on to Vanessa. Welcome and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Riley. I write historical fiction, historical romance, and now historical mystery. I've got about 20 some odd books. I think my books are like able to drink in the US at this point. And I'm just very pleased to be here. Richard, Christy, Tracy, and Margaret. This should be fun.
Wonderful. Yeah, 21. You're very, very close to your books being able to drink. I love that. Next, Margaret, welcome back. We've already had you on. We're super excited that you're here again. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. My name is Margaret Pinard. I am a historical fiction writer. I've got 5 books out. Since I don't have the background behind me, I'll hold them up for a second. There we go. There's the latest in a series. I'm most focused on the UK in the 19th century to sort of narrow it down, but I'm changing course to Chicago in late 19th. So little, I don't know, 80-degree turn. And yeah, well, it's a morass right now. So I'm just digging in, and it's a lot of fun, which is why I need the social engagement to keep me going in this phase. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. And finally, we have Anne Gracie. Welcome and tell us about yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. Now, you can all hear that I speak funny. That's because I'm from Australia. And I live in Melbourne, where we have been locked down for most of the year. We're currently in a 67-day lockdown, which might finish in 2 weeks. It's tough, but I think it's worth it. We've saved a lot of lives, I think. So, swings and roundabouts. I get to talk with the person at the supermarket and the dog, and so I'm quite overexcited. So if I get too excited, just give me a smack and I'll calm down. I write historical romance. It's set in the Regency. I'm published with Berkeley in New York, and I've got 20-something books out with them. I've no idea. I always forget. I'm bad with numbers. And last year, I did my first little experiment with indie publishing, and I did this little Christmas Bride book. That's my latest Berkeley, which was out last month, and this is Christmas Bride. So the indie stuff has been pretty interesting. I'm really enjoying it. So, and I've just handed in a book and to my editor, and now I'm getting back to another possible little indie novella. So that's me, and I apologise in advance if my dog climbs up on the couch with me, because she hasn't seen many people either.
Absolutely no problem at all. So that is great to hear. Very interesting about the indie publishing as well. I'm sure we'll get into that. So I just wanted to start with a basic question, and that is, how did you get into historical fiction? Because I know for me, it was kind of a roundabout route. I had first read historical fiction. It was Sharon K. Penman, I believe, when I was much younger. And, I had read it. I had been like, wow, I really love this. I'm really enjoying this. It's fantastic. I could never write historical fiction. That was the first thing I said. There's no way I could possibly do it. It's too complicated. It would take too long, too much research. Years later, here I am writing historical fiction. And it's kind of funny how these things can happen even when we doubt ourselves sometimes. So, in no particular order, anyone who wants to jump in, how did you get started with historical fiction?
I started as a child because we moved around a lot when I was a kid. I attacked every little local library I could. I read everything. And for me, historical fiction was no different from sci-fi, fantasy, anything else. It was a world. And it was always the people I liked. And then when I was 11, I discovered Georgette Heyer. And I just fell in love, and I have read and reread her for years, and then branched out from there. But that she's the reason that I write Regency era romance. Yeah. Because I loved her humour, and being quite a flippant person myself, who got into trouble in school quite a lot for making people laugh or laughing inappropriately, it suits me. So yeah.
So before we go to the next one, I just wanted to ask Anne, when you said that Regency Romance, I am a fantasy author and I don't read that. What does Regency imply?
Regency is a period in English history where, if you might have seen the movie The Madness of King George, right? King George III went mad. I think they think now it was he had porphyria. Poor fellow was practically tortured, but he was unable to sort of carry on being a king, and so he was shoved in the, shoved away. And his son, the Prince Regent, or the Prince, was made regent in his place, and so that lasted for about 11 years, something like that. And so that's a very narrow time period in English history, but there was so much happening within England and in the wider world. This is when Napoleon was waving his sword in Europe. There were just so many different things happening. So for me, it's fantastic. I've been able to set books in Egypt, in Spain, as well as just in. My editors prefer me to do it London and Bath, but I just need to escape occasionally. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. And thanks, Margaret, for beginners in the back. That's me exactly. When it comes to historical fiction, I am definitely a beginner. So, Margaret, you might as well continue on with this question.
Okay, so I would say it's a combination of American Girl books as a kid. Definitely got into those, got into history. Newsies sort of fan fiction in high school. That's sort of like musical getting you into history, and Ragtime. That was another wonderful one. And just feeling very comfortable in the humanities and the sort of power struggle questions. So when I came to writing as a more professional pursuit, I thought, I want to do stories of people who have not traditionally been empowered, and stories that are forgotten today but hold lessons for us. And so that was why it was like, historical fiction holds up a mirror, and maybe it makes it easier for some of us to see the struggles. And so that's where I started, and then I sort of set my sights on what is not being done yet. And, I steered clear of Regency because there was so much going on and I was just beginning. And I steered clear of Victorian and High Victorian because there was a lot going on there. And so I went right in the middle and was like, well, let's try that. Let's start there. So 1820s, and just learned as I went.
That's awesome. and maybe we'll go around our rectangular circle. And sorry, Tracy, I see you have your hand up, but we'll just get Vanessa just to keep my OCD brain.
Okay, because my Genesis story is a combination of Anne's and Margaret, so it's appropriate for me to come next, Tracy. So I'll warm up the crowd for you. My mother was very much had our children into literature. So we were reading Thoreau and we were reading Wadsworth and all this sorts of stuff. And we get to Jane Austen. And I was like, oh, great. Here's another one of these books my mom's going to have me read. And I was like, wait a minute, this is a little different. And I keep going, and it gets the humor of her books. It just drew me in. But then you look at the social constructs that are underneath, and you see this much richer world. And by the time you get to Sanditon, her very last book, the wealthiest woman in the book is a mulatto woman from the West Indies. So this time period, I do an extended Regency or extended Georgian Regency period from about 1750 to 1830 is, to me, one of the most dynamic periods in the world because everybody's questing for freedom. You have those rabble Americans that want to be free of George III. You've got the French that want to be free of their king. You've got the Haitians that want to be free of everybody, all within the same time frame. And then you have all of these islands in the West Indies or colonies in the West Indies that are all wanting freedom. There's religious freedom. Everybody wants it, but no one can understand what the other person is doing. So my first reach was to look at historical romance because I think that when one is assured of a happy ending, it's a great way to start looking at some of the tougher issues. The intermingling of races, racism, etc., misogyny, that are the underpinnings of this dynamic world of very rich people and very, very poor people within the Regency context. But if you're short of a happy ending, it's safe, right? That's wonderful. But then as you go forward and you look and you find stories such as Dorothy Kirwan Thomas, that is a true story. So you're not guaranteed a happy ending. You're guaranteed moments of power. I like to find the underdog, the women who've done something really interesting. And so that moves you from the sphere of romance to the sphere of historical fiction or biographical historical fiction. And then you just find out cool things that are going on in the world, and it doesn't quite fit a historical fiction. It doesn't fit a romance. Hey, let's just kill somebody and make it a mystery. So that's where we are. Tracy, up to you.
I like that quote, and Margaret wrote it out for us. Freedom, everyone wants it, but no one understands what it means for another. That was an awesome quote.
It's great. Yes. Thank you, Vanessa and Margaret and Anne. And yep. Can I just say, yeah, what they said? Because truly very, very similar paths. I mean, I got into historical fiction first and foremost, and still as a reader. And my very first historical fiction, a novel that I read was Herman Wouk's Winds of War. Actually, no, War and Remembrance. And then I read Winds of War. And I was so completely hooked because I was sort of, we always had to take history, American history, world history, and so forth through school. And I was, I was a good student, but history was not actually my strongest subject at all. Because I don't know, it just seemed like be memorizing a bunch of facts and names and dates, and it was just so dry, And so when I read War and Remembrance, and it came alive. It's about, of course, World War II, which, studied. It's an interesting war, but, getting facts, figures, names, Nimitz, I don't know, people. But it made it so much more real, even though it was fiction. And I sort of, to myself, call it history light. It's like getting all the history, but without any of the calories, It's, so that really started my love of historical fiction. And so I started reading other authors, and by and by, I realized that a lot of it was written about war. And for the most part, it was written by men. And so I started branching out a little bit. I started reading alternative fiction. And then that did it for me for a while, where they could change who won the Civil War, so to speak, that kind of thing. But again, it was about war, and it was by men. And then I was really looking for other things to talk about. There's other things in history besides war. Let's look at the different ages and what can we learn from them and what applies to now. And about that time, I started finding books by authors like Kristen Hanna and Kristen Harmel and Kate Quinn, and they were writing the women's story. They were finding these amazing women, or eras where women were really making differences, and it was like, wow, light was coming on. I was just enjoying it just so thoroughly, but still. I wasn't thinking about writing it. I've always been a writer, but I pretty much have written, was writing nonfiction, journal articles and so forth. My background's in nursing, and I wrote health columns and so forth, and was very fact-based. And historical fiction was just my fun thing. But then I came upon the story of Emily Warren Roebling, who, of course, is the heroine in my debut, The Engineer's Wife, who, yes, thank you, Margaret. There she is. Hope you've read it and enjoyed it. But anyway, I came upon this story that, I grew up in northern New Jersey, been, over the Brooklyn Bridge many, many times, know the area, and I didn't know the story. And when I found out about Emily, who took over building the bridge when it was basically illegal for her to do any of it, because she had to get it done after her husband and father-in-law, of course, devastatingly were not able to. I found that story and I'm like, oh, I want to read the book. There's got to be a great historical fiction novel about this, And there wasn't. I mean, there's just almost nothing except for a children's book and a small, thin little biography of her. It wasn't there. And so that was the moment I became a historical fiction author, because I had to write that story. So that's it.
That's amazing. And I love long forgotten historical figures, people that, people today have never heard of, that used to be really important or notorious, or never got the credit that they were due. Either way, I absolutely eat that up, honestly. And I love researching that kind of stuff too. Mine is on the darker side because it's suspense, but I really like this inspiring stuff as well. It's a whole other thing. I love it. So I want to dig a little bit into research. I believe I read, Vanessa, I hope I got this right, that for Island Queen, you spent something like 4 years of world building and 6 years of research. And I wanted all of us to talk a little bit about, how long we have, maybe the longest we've spent on a single novel researching, or how long it typically takes, anything like that. So let's start with you, Vanessa.
Yeah. First of all, Island Queen was the book I never thought I was going to write. I was actually answering the question, was Miss Lamb real? So we go back to Sanditon, the wealthiest woman is Miss Lamb. So I was on the hunt for a West Indian woman who was migrating back and forth from London, and literally stumbled across a cartoon of Prince William Henry lovingly embracing a Black woman in a hammock, done by Gilroy. And Gilroy is a satirist. He's a misogynist. He's a sexist. You just keep filling in the blanks. If he has a chance to draw a woman, he goes to town and makes us look homely and desperate. But if he gets the chance to draw a Black woman, oh, he just has some extra fun, garish nose, illiterate language, all the sorts of fun things. But this woman in this picture is drawn beautifully. No joke about her. She's not a joke in this particular instance. She's the tattle. This is what your prince is doing. So I suspected this was a real woman, and I went on a hunt to find this real woman. And unfortunately, men are much more documented in history than anybody else. So I followed Prince William Henry, future King William IV, and you find this madcap adventure that he takes through the West Indies. They're breaking brothels in Jamaica. They break one so badly that they have to pay the next day for all the damages. He is kicking up his boots in all these different colonies. But when he gets to Dominica, his friends write letters back home, and they're saying he's with that mulatto woman again. That mulatto woman is very handsome. Do you know he's dancing at the mulatto ball with Dorothy Kirwan? So I finally found the name, but this journey takes about 2 or 3 years. And when you find the name, then you've got to figure out, well, who is she? What's been done? And literally, you for women, you have to trace our reproductive history is our history. So you find she has a child, she has children in Montserrat, she has children in Demerara, she has children in Granada. And when you loop these through, there's like 1,000 nautical miles between. And you've got to ask yourself, well, why would somebody move, especially from Dominica to Granada when she had a successful business that she's running in these various places? And so to put all this together and find it and make it make sense, you've got not only have to understand her lifetime, but you got to understand the world she's living in, which means you've got to know what is going on in these various colonies, what is going on in French history, what is going on in English history, what is going on in American history, because those darn Americans keep coming in those islands and trying to take pieces just like everybody else. Spanish history, and you have to overlay all of this, because when you do it, then you see, oh, she moved because of the War of 1812 and the blockades are keeping, the island has now changed from French hands to Spanish hands to British hands to Dutch hands and back. And you figure out, because all of these different worlds have different rules of why people become free and how they become free and how their manumissions are paid for. So to put all that together was about 6 years. But on top of that, I have to understand the Regency and Georgian world. That was my primer. What does Austen know? Let me go dig in here, and we find out about King George. We find out about the strata in history, and we find out about the pockets of where people of different backgrounds, religions, etc., are all congregating within London, and they're having education in Scotland and all. So you've got to put all this together. Needless to say, that's about 10 years. Now that I'm here, I can write anything in the world because I'm going to stay between 1750 and 1830 for a long time. There's a lot of stories that haven't been told, and I have all the bases now. So that's a long answer for a long period of time.
That's incredible. I love hearing stories like that. And like you said, it's kind of like, I don't know if all the rest of you feel this way, but once you've really dug into a time period and you really get at its roots and understand it, I definitely want to stay in it. So and especially with the work you did, I can certainly understand using all of that continually. I would too. How about the rest of you? How long has it taken? What is the longest any of your research has taken, or maybe the toughest thing you've researched? Either one.
I'll go. The longest would be for my first book, The Engineer's Wife, because I knew nothing about engineering. And I had to build a bridge, at least in my mind, so I could explain what was happening in my story. So I had to get a pretty good understanding of some engineering. Then, of course, learning about the history of the time. But it was really fun because I got to find first sources. I was able to order magazines from eBay, like Harper's Bazaar, that were actual original. And there's just no replacing being able to touch and feel. Even though they're very, very old and delicate, just to actually see it and feel it, and that really helped me get into the time of it. So I spent probably 6 years with a combination of research. I think my process may be a little bit different, Vanessa, because I did maybe a year solid just research, not really writing anything. And then another 6 months of sort of starting to write, but realizing, got to go back to research, and then another 6 months pure research. But then after that, after the first 2 years, it was writing. By then I had a full first draft done, but then it was filling in. It was looking over the manuscript and finding those parts that just didn't sing, that just weren't of the period, or I felt, or I got feedback saying they just didn't feel in the era. And then I would go down another research rabbit hole and usually find some really interesting things. And then, go back to writing again. So it's another 4 years of sort of going back and forth.
Research rabbit holes are where I live, Tracy. So
yes. Tell me about them. If you ever want to know why there's a snake in my book, that's a research rabbit hole.
Yeah. Look, when I first started writing, the internet was not a thing, really. So, I mean, these days it's so easy to sort of dig around in the past and find old diaries and things. But for my second book, I wanted to have my characters go on the Grand Tour, which was, you know, the big deal about traveling. Young men, particularly in England, well-heeled young men, would be taken on a trip through Europe, where they were supposed to improve their education and their social connections, and really they just got drunk and screwed and did all sorts of naughty things. But I wanted my heroine and hero to do that. And there was a period in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars, 1802 to 1803, where there was peace declared, and it only lasted a short time, but they thought it was going to last for ages. And English people flocked to the continent, because all through the French Revolution they couldn't do it. And then in 1803, Napoleon invaded the Piedmonte, and boom, they all had to flee or be interned or whatever. And but what actually started that story was, a bit like Vanessa, I saw a cartoon in a book called The Grand Tour, where aristocrats, English aristocrats, or just aristocrats, I don't know whether they're English or not because it didn't say, but were being carried across the Alps, the Swiss Alps, in chairs. They were stuffed with straw and sheep's skins and whatever, tied up into these chairs, and with four hefty, hearty peasant boys, they would jog over the Alps. And I just loved that story so much. I thought, I've got to write this. But then it was so hard to find details from the time. And in the end, I had to I followed up some footnotes in a couple of books that dealt with the Grand Tour, but they were dealing with it in a really wide-ranging thing, and I wanted that particular time. And I followed those up and found that a book had been published of letters written by a young Irish woman travelling with an Irish lord and lady in that period. And my state library had it in their rare book collection, so I had to go in there, and I was able to organise an interlibrary loan to my local library, where I had to sit in a separate carrel and take notes. But then once I'd finished the book, and a year or 6 months later, the internet arrived in my life, and I found a copy of this book in Ireland, and was able to buy it. And it was wonderful, because the young woman writing these letters back to her brother, because they were letters, they didn't have that stilted quality that sort of history books sometimes have. And she was funny. She was funny in the same way that Jane Austen is funny. She was snarky. She was a trifle bitchy about some of the people that she met. And I was able to use quite a few details that she was talking about, which you would never find in a history book. And since then, and thank God for the internet, I have dug around. When I wrote the book that was set in Egypt after Napoleon had been there, I was able to access quite a few diaries of people who had, mostly men, obviously they were British men because I was reading in English, but they were talking about their travels there and their impressions, horribly racist impressions of the local people and all that sort of stuff. But it was fascinating. And so ever since then, I have been a big user of diaries where I need to. I'm not writing historical fiction, I'm writing historical romance. So I don't have real characters. I occasionally have a figurehead character sort of, walk past. But I'll take a bit from here and a bit from there because I like making it up. I don't make up the history, but I make up the people. So, yeah, and that's fun. That's me.
I'm also a big proponent of when you find something, take a screenshot, a document. You'll never find it again. I don't care how
absolutely.
you are. You'll never find it again.
Yeah. That's why when I have been able to buy a book, I have. Or these days, often you can get the ebook. And they're quite sort of, they're not terribly well laid out because someone's just scanned some old document in. But, look, there's gold in them there hills, they really are. Yeah.
And I was just going to say, I don't know how your guys' library systems work, but mine doesn't have interlibrary loan and it hasn't for the length of the pandemic. And I'm just like, oh.
we have a really good library system. Well, there's several systems, but every state has the state library. Ours was started as a free library in 1850 by, because the guy who was pushing for it was absolutely adamant that everybody should have access to books. Regardless of money, education, whatever. There was in Australia at that time, there was a very big push for workmen's education, so that whoever wanted to could get educated, and that's kind of been my background too. I've worked in adult literacy all my life. The last paid job I had was running courses for young homeless refugees, that kind of thing. That there's quite a strong background of that in here. But as well as that, the libraries are not funded locally, they are funded by the federal government. And so there's been a lot of old libraries that have been renewed sometimes, and they are fabulous. These amazing buildings stacked with fantastic books. So it's a really important part of the culture. And I would fight to the death probably not to the death actually, but, fight pretty tough to keep it going. Yeah. And look, there's a wonderful, Eva Ebertson is an author who I think is absolutely, was wonderful. She's dead. And she wrote a letter or an article for The Guardian UK in defence of local libraries, and it's based on her personal experience of coming to England as a refugee when she was 9 in the 1930s. And it is just splendid. And if you read it, you'll go off and buy her adult books, I'm sure. It just, in a nutshell that absolutely moves you, it shows you how vital libraries are. So I'll see if I can find it and I'll pop it in the chat thingy, watch it on the side while we're talking. I will shut up.
That'd be wonderful. That'd be not wonderful you shut up, but that'd be wonderful if you find it. So, Margaret, I think we've still got you to hear from you with regard to your research.
Sure. I'll just pop in with a short answer. It's the one I'm working on because it's just not forming, because every time I try to make the story do something, I discover something that changes. And so it's not coming together the way the other books have. So normally it's a couple years, I think, because the previous series I had was mainly a composite. It was telling a story of a whole movement or a whole period through one family, but this one is more about one person and people who are real. And so it's just like, it's a new thing for me. So learning everything over again, as has to happen every once in a while.
So I'm sure Christy's got so many questions that she wants to run by you. I'm just going to ask one, and then Christy can have the rest of the night. I was trying to, because I'm a fantasy author, not a historical fiction author, I was trying to think of what questions can I ask you. And the one thing that kept coming to mind over the last few days is with regard to historical accuracy. How do you guys handle the language of the time? Depending on how far back in history uh, you go, people spoke so much different than they do today. Like taking just Anne, for example, today, being an Aussie, she has so many of these wonderful sayings that are just foreign to the rest of the world, and we don't know what half of them mean. But so if you go back in history and all these different periods of time, like I'm sure there's a lot of sayings and everything else that go on, in the UK, in Europe, and even in the US. So do you throw in a few words from the period, especially in dialogue, or do you keep it from not like you don't want it to read like Shakespeare where it's very hard to understand? So, or do you stay true to the era? How would you guys handle that? Who wants to go first with that one? How's that for a big question? Go ahead,
Yeah.
Vanessa.
I believe in a mixture. You've got to have some words, some concepts to make it have the authentic feel, but you're telling a story for the modern audience. So you've got to, if I'm starting in my historical fictions, I'm starting to use other languages. And so if I were going to give you a whole paragraph in Fawn, pretty sure I'm going to lose you. If I do Yoruba or Twi, I'm going to lose you. So you sprinkle things in so that you get, and you make sure, I believe in trying to make sure the context is within the same sentence or very close to it, so that I'm not making my reader fall out of the book. I want you to get through the whole book. And so if you've got to remember, it's modern readers that are reading this. So you have to think about that. And then as you look at different periods, there have been characterizations of people and dialects that are wrong. My favorite is that Regency and Victorian folks never use contractions. Have you looked at those letters?
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you? So you to me, as an author, you have a choice. You have a choice in the words that you're using. You have a choice in the way that you're using it. And if you can get the perfect marriage is an authentic feel, but realizing you're dealing with 20th, 21st century people reading your book, and you want them to get it. And you want to be sensitive, because, just because certain words are used doesn't mean you have to use them, because there's a million ways to convey the same information. So if that's not vague enough answer for you, I don't know what is.
No, that's fine. And sorry, Tracy had her hand up second there. Sorry, Anne.
No.
All right, so I was going to say, yeah, I agree, Vanessa. You're walking a tightrope, basically, because the modern reader doesn't have the patience to read through the more flowery, the more verbose language that was used previously. However, and I have to have a caveat there, that we're looking, we're going past, around 1900 or so, we're looking at always written language. And then, as in now, our oral speech is very different from written language. So I sort of take that as a little bit of license to not write, dialogue like it was written back then. And, for both of those reasons, oral is different than written, and people won't stand for it. So what I try to do is make sure I never use a word, obviously, that wasn't used in that manner, because sometimes words existed, but they meant very different things at the time. So to be very careful of that, and even though I think I'm careful, my editors still have caught a few things. So that's really important, because that just it takes away your authenticity as a historical fiction writer. So and even phrases, you have to be careful with phrases. And if you take that and you cut down the verbosity and make the cadence a bit more modern than it probably was at that time, and you're careful of the words and the phrases, and then you throw in a few little magic things, words, phrases, things, objects, products that existed then, that were popular then, or songs or whatever, which that's not fresh on my mind, because I was doing that today, looking up songs that were popular in 1915. And in that way, it helps bring the reader to exactly the time you want them to be at. And of course, with enough explanation that they're just not left in the dark, but not too much so that it wouldn't prevent someone. And this is my favorite thing when I hear a reader has gone and, delved a little bit more deeply into something because they wanted to learn more about that. And that, that to me is almost the true prize, is having people take a real interest in the era, the country, whatever it is you're writing about. So that's my story.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anne, and maybe you can throw in a bit of J.D. Estrada's question as well when you answer this. Writing historical fiction, are there any throwback libations, dishes, sweets, or treats that you guys enjoyed? I imagine to throw in there.
Well, I enjoy a whole lot of them, but only virtually, because I can't be bothered cooking them. And I try to use some of that in my fiction too, because there is a deliciousness about sinking into a different world. But look, I studied English literature at uni, and we did Shakespeare, and we did Chaucer, and we had to listen to Chaucer in the what was believed to be the original sounding thing, and it's really difficult. But honestly, I think, like the others have said, I do think that studying your fiction with dialect, whether it's historical or whether it's the Irishman across the road or something like that, it's always dodgy. You just need a small hint to remind you that's the Irishman. Okay, over there, that's the old lady who swears or whatever. You don't need a lot of it. And the more you try and do, if you're trying to actually read, I also did linguistics, and, we used to have to write down exactly how people spoke. And, it's like reading linguistics. If you try and write dialect as it sounds to your ears, it's like reading a foreign language to somebody, and it just stops them accessing the story and the people in the story. So I think it doesn't matter whether it's fantasy, whether it's historical, whether it's sci-fi, whether it's crime. Go easy, go light on the dialect. The other thing that I use, and I use it all the time when I'm writing, I probably access it 2 or 3 times a day sometimes, is the Oxford English Dictionary, which is online. Again, our gorgeous library system. It's free if you belong to the State Library, which is also free. And all the state libraries in Australia, I believe, have it. So it's just a click for me. And then I can put the word in, and I can see when it was first used, how it was first used. And there are so many things that I've had to go, it was that was 1880s before it actually made it into print. It could have been around, but, it's a bit tricky. So, but then there are things like historical dictionaries of slang. And I was looking for one book for, another way of saying bonking. I had a landlady. Yeah, exactly. I had a landlady who, they're also online, which is cool. I had a mean landlady who was talking to my hero and the girl who had very scandalously visited him. And I wanted her to say, no funny business kind of thing. And so I was looking, and then I found no joinin' giblets. And I thought that was perfect because it was funny, and it was visual, and I had quite a few reader letters about saying, "Did you make that up?" And I went, "No, it's real. It was real." So there's a lot around to play with, and to keep you on track, because your readers are modern, and I don't. My favourite comments from readers is, I never thought I would read historical novels. I never thought I would read history. I hated history, but it doesn't feel like reading history in your books. And I know there's a stack of history in there, but they're reading for story, just the same way I did as a kid. So that's my advice.
and I know we're running out of time, but just to answer that last
Oh,
question.
no worries.
When I tell you that the 4 sort of like behind the scenes beta reading people that I asked about this title were like, yeah, I don't know what it means. And I was like, oh, there's nothing else that really fits that like embodies this tone and this period and this like cri de coeur, right? So I was just like, I'm doing it. I'm doing it anyway. And I think that the language thing, it is a fine line, but sometimes it can actually help you find your audience in terms of people on BookTube now who I talk to do know what this means. And so I'm very encouraged in that. And yeah, that's the thing about the language I'll say. So if anyone has last pieces. What is that?
Okay, so JD asked about libations. So this is a rosy I'm gonna mess it up. Sanguinet. It's a type of champagne that Prince William Henry would have had on his boat, his frigate, in the West Indies during the time about 1790-ish. So doing a lot of research can be fun.
I'd like to address libations and food for just a second. Okay, so my second book, The War Nurse, came out in July, is set in France, and I was lucky enough to be already living in Europe. So I was forced to go to France and taste the food that they would have been eating at that time. And I had croissants and beignets, and those are my favorite things, because had to go. It was research, so I had to say that I was forced to eat some wonderful French food. And I also, for my first book, I tucked into a very emotional scene. I had a big scene I wanted to write, but I wanted to keep the setting very sort of low profile, and I chose just an ordinary breakfast. But as a little bit of a wink, and perhaps Christy will know what I'm talking about if she's in New Jersey, as a sort of wink to my New York, New Jersey friends, and an ongoing battle that is still occurring there is a breakfast meat that is pretty much only known in that area. I call it Taylor ham, but I have to say that quietly, because there are some people who would, would excommunicate me for that, because in in Central Jersey, it's known as pork roll. We won't get into the whole argument, but anyway, there's this huge argument. It's a total thing in that tiny little geographic area, and it actually happened to been invented in Trenton, my hero's hometown, at some years before they actually lived there. So it was perfectly appropriate that they be eating it in this big emotional scene, and I got my little wink in to my people.
Yeah, can I just add something in there? There was a comment just then about tasting food. That was really good. Ivan Day has a site. He recreates, he's a cook who recreates amazing Regency things. I have a number of old cookbooks, and I have a preference for including the stranger kind of things. So, a dish of fried lettuce and things like that. So yeah, I enjoy, and brains and the things that we tend to sort of go ooh a bit these days. So yeah. These are my favorite one is, I think, Eliza Smith, and it's sort of 1770 something, and she has recipes for all seasons, and she has the layout of the table for different seasons, and the food coming from Australia. The seasons are different, so I have to double check everything that they're about to serve, because so I find that kind of thing really useful too. But yeah, it's fun to play with food and drink and things like that. It adds a sort of an extra pleasure. So yeah.
So I see that we're getting quite past our time here, and I don't want to cut it off, because I think we're all enjoying answering these questions. Everything else, I want to get to one of our readers' questions. This is looks like it's just for you, Anne, and it's from Wanda, and she's a regular viewer with our show. This is a little off topic, but I have a question for Anne. Firstly, congrats on being nominated 5 times alongside Nora Roberts for the Rita. Her question is, is the controversy surrounding the previous Rita, now Vivian, has it changed the way you write and develop your characters, or has it had any influence on you at all?
No, it hasn't. I enter for competitions, but I never write for them. I write for. I can't. I try. Any time I've tried to do something. Look, my first book for Berkeley, which was not my first book, but it was my first book for before that I wrote for a couple of historicals for Mills and Boon, for Harlequin. And my first book for Berkeley, I was trying to write a hero who was dark and dangerous. And he turned into a light, flippant, funny, wisecracking guy. I just could not control him. And any time I try to do something, look, follow a recipe. And I will get the recipe out and think, yeah, I'll make that. And then I make it, and then I read the recipe. So I don't. And I've been a member of Romance Writers of America for a long time, but I'm not American, so I don't feel as though it's for me to tell people how to run their organization. I'll open my mouth about the Australian romance writers. I was a president of that for a couple of years, and I'm a what am I called? Lifetime member. So they can't kick me out, basically. So yeah.
So, Christy, is there something you want to ask us or ask the ladies before we leave?
Go for it, Vanessa. I see that you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to, as an American who was formerly in RWA, I think we all have to look at the stories we're trying to tell, and we have to be sensitive. Once again, we're writing to a 21st century audience, and there's new scholarship. So my thing is to question everything. Question what you think happened. Every time I hear it, no, it never had, I'm pretty sure there's at least 2 or 3 examples of yes, it did, and here it is. Or give us another 2, 3 years, you will find it. So I think everybody is just we're in a state where we get to experiment, we get to research, we get to bring new stories, and I don't think there's ever been a time that has been more open to new stories. And there's a story that you can find, no matter what your lifestyle is, your race, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic background. There's a story for you that you're looking for, whether it's in romance or historical fiction. There's something. If you want to know something more about a topic, there's a book that's been written. And I think beyond all controversies, that's the thing that's really present in mind right now is let's find stories. Let's find things that bring us together. Let's find things that expose stereotypes for what they are. And let's just learn about things and enjoy stuff. It's okay to enjoy things. It's okay to love things. It's okay to read things. And let's just find everything that makes us happy, makes us learn, and go forward. Forget all the controversies. Let's move forward.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we could probably talk all night. I have many questions that were still on my list, but as Richard pointed out, we are running out of time, and I certainly don't want to keep you too long. So thank you all for your expertise. Thank you for sharing your journeys. It's really been fascinating. I love hearing all of these stories. And why don't we just go around so that you can each share either the next book that's coming out or your latest book. And then you can tell us where we can find you as well. So let's start with Anne.
Okay. The new book that's just gone into my editor is called The Rake's Daughter, and it's about the illegitimate daughter of a rake who is determined not to be put in her place. I kind of deal with the aristocracy, but nearly all of my characters are the sort of people who've fallen through the cracks. Rather than, I think I've done 2 dukes, and they were both, only one of them was a main character in 20-something books. It's more interesting, I think, for me to write those stories. So I've got a website, www.gracie.com, and I write a blog and a newsletter, and I blog with the Word Wenches, who are all historical fiction writers, historical fiction or historical romance. So Mary Jo Putney, Pat Rice, Susan King, Nicola Cornick, Christina Courtney. I've probably left somebody out. I don't know. Sorry. Anyway, it's a fun group.
Great. And thank you so much for being with us today. We
Oh, and
really
thank
enjoyed having
you. I'm
you.
sorry, that was really rude of me. Thank you so much for inviting me in the first place. It's lovely, and I've really enjoyed chatting. And I think you're right. I don't know that I could go on all night because it's not quite noon yet here. But it's been really interesting talking and exchanging ideas and finding where we're similar and where we're different, and it's been lovely. Thank you. Lovely to meet everybody. I'm off to buy different books.
We have to buy all the books really now. How about you next, Margaret? Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Oh goodness.
She fell.
Uh-oh.
Poltergeist.
And that sounded
On
heavy.
the head.
I'm glad that missed you. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounded real heavy. So.
Sorry.
So what am I working on now? That was the first question, right? That just scared everything out of my head. So like I said, I'm working on a book that's set in Chicago in 1893 because there's a lot of labor unrest and activity going on. I'm centering on a woman who is a printer because I've got a background of printing in my family that I want to delve into in that period, right as it was transitioning from hand typesetting to linotyping and sort of getting away from the old ways. So there's another twist in history that I want to explore. And you can find me, I think on most platforms, Margaret Pinard, except for Twitter, where I'm Taste Life Twice, because that's my publishing company. And yeah, Patreon and Twitter and YouTube. Those are my main drags. So hope to see you on one of those three.
Thank you. And especially on YouTube, because Margaret has a great booktube channel. Queen of the Books You've Never Heard Of, I think, is one of your hashtags. And I love that. So how about you next, Vanessa? Thank you so much for being here.
Okay. Oh, and thank you guys for having me. I actually have 3 books coming out next year. So in the spring, you're going to get A Duke, The Spy, and Artist in a Lie. It is the 3rd book in the Rogues and Remarkable Women series. We're going to answer some questions that have been lingering since book 1 and 2, et cetera, et cetera. In the summer, you get my 2nd historical fiction. This is Sister Mother Warrior. We're looking at the 2 women who shaped the Haitian Revolution. And what people don't realize is the Haitian Revolution actually is over 50 years, from 1758 all the way to 1805, when Jean-Jacques Dessalines actually is able to free them from France. And then in the fall, you're going to get my very first Lady Worthing's Mysteries, Murder in Westminster. We have an amateur detective who wants to use her new status as a baron to fight for abolition, because in 1805, once Haiti became free, all the abolition movements in the world stopped. They were good with people being free, but now you want to run a country? Oh, I don't think so. So we have Wilberforce and Hannah More. They are stuck. Everybody's trying to figure things out. And so she wants to use her influence to try and get it started again. And the neighbor she's warring with, his wife is found dead on her fence. And so she's going to have to figure that out, as well as she's trying to help get the movement started. And that's the Lady Worthing Mysteries, Murder in Westminster, comes out in the fall.
A lot to look forward to. And you have, your website is just yourname.com, right?
VanessaRiley.com. There's research there. Very active on Instagram, slightly active on Twitter. I'm there on occasion on Facebook, but all the connectors are on my website.
Awesome. And finally, Tracy, thank you so much for being here. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Well, thank you. Thanks again for having me. And I've enjoyed so much listening to everybody. I've learned a lot. I've wanted to be taking notes, but that looks kind of silly. But it's up here, but you may be hearing from me when there's something I've forgotten. But I guess I should talk first about the war nurse, since she decided to hit me on the head. That was embarrassing. But my most recent publication is The War Nurse, which is the story of Julia Stimson, a real life person, a nurse who recruited and trained 64 nurses to go off to France during World War I, before the Americans even had troops there. And she wasn't an Army nurse, neither was anybody she recruited, but she just stepped up to it, and off they went to take over a military hospital from the British, who were completely worn out by this time. This is 1917. And so that's the story of the war nurse. And I'm very proud of it as a retired nurse myself. And then my upcoming book that I'm writing now is still untitled. My working title is The President's Wife, sort of echoing The Engineer's Wife. And it's the story of Edith Bowling Wilson, who some refer to as the first woman president, who was the second wife of Woodrow Wilson, who, while in office, had a devastating stroke back in 1919. And during a pretty critical time in our history, when we were trying to ratify the Treaty of Versailles and get the League of Nations going in order to prevent, another world war. So that's what I'm writing, her story. So if anybody has a great title, send it to me. I'm open. But my website is tracyendersonwood.com. So it's pretty easy. And Twitter handle is Tracy Enderson. And Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are pretty much the only things I do. I don't YouTube or VTube or whatever tube. I blog every once in a while, not too much. I do have a newsletter that I send out not real regularly. But if you go to my website, you can sign up for my newsletter, and then I'll put in little goodies in there every so often. I'm hoping to put some outtakes, because people have asked me for that. I don't know if you've gotten questions about that, but people have said, send me something that's not in the book. And I have sort of a collection, and I'm going to be doing that soon. So write to me. I love to hear from readers and other authors all the time. And thanks again.
Can I just check whether people can see that Eva Ebertson link that I put up? I think it might just be in private chat. It's not there for
Are you
everyone.
talking about the When Love Flourished?
Yeah, When Love Flourished in them for medical textbooks. That one?
You shared it in the private
yep,
chat, and I copied and pasted it.
Yeah, but I think it's only for us. I don't know that it's for...
I did copy and paste it into the main chat for everyone to see, but it's under Richard's name.
Oh,
So
okay. It's in the main chat. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that is fantastic. So yes, thank you all so much for being here. As for me, what I'm working on, I'm currently working on Grimoire Society of Dark Acts, which is historical fantasy. It is on Kindle Vella, and I just released, I think a week or two ago now, I can't remember, episode 10. This is, an episode series type of thing. And it is about this secret magical society that existed during the Victorian era, multiple grimoire societies, and we're just getting into really the meat of it, which is the Grimoire Society of Assassins is trying to resurrect the Harp brothers. I don't know if any of you know them. They are long forgotten America's first serial killers. So, they are really brutal, and there is not a whole lot of information on them. So, I'm working feverishly on that and truly enjoying it. So definitely tune into that. It's on Amazon, like I said, Kindle Vella, and always working on short stories and book 3 of the Dark Victoriana collection novels as well, which will include Alan Pinkerton. He's not new, but he is always a wonderful person to feature in a book. So he's going to have an impact on one of my main characters, a big impact. So that's about it for me. Again, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Richard, take us out of here.
Yes, thank you everybody for showing up today. That was great, and we'll probably do this again sometime next year, and we'll get you back. And if anyone wants to appear individually on our show, just email Christy or I, or message one of us, and we'll have you on for yourself. And so next week's guest is crime thriller and Western author Dwayne Clayton. Dwayne combines his knowledge and experience as a police officer and paramedic to write realistic crime thrillers. Crisis Point, Dwayne's first novel, was a finalist for the 2015 Crime Writers of Canada Arthur Ellis Awards. And I'm just got to get the right mouse here so I can get us out of here. So until then, for Christy and myself and all of our wonderful guests tonight, we wish you a safe and happy week ahead. Take good care, everybody.